I thought my brother had died years ago. The car accident, the twisted wreckage, the broken glass. It was supposed to be the end of his story. I identified his body myself. But last night, I got a call at 3 a.m. A voice I never expected. "Robert, it's Simon. I know who I am now." It was the kind of night you'd think nothing could go wrong. I was fast asleep when the phone rang. The kind of call you ignore at 3 a.m., but something about it made me pick up. I wasn't ready for what came next. The caller ID showed a strange number, one I didn't recognize. At first, I hesitated. You don't answer calls from unknown numbers at this hour, especially after everything that happened. But then something nagged at me, something in the back of my mind pushing me to just answer. I picked it up. "Hello, Robert." The voice on the other end was rough, cracked, as if the person hadn't spoken in years. But underneath that rustiness was a strange familiarity that made my blood run cold. "Robert, it's Simon." I froze. Simon. My brother. The one I buried years ago after the crash. The one I thought was dead. The one I had identified at the morgue. "Simon?" My voice cracked, my heart racing. "But you're dead. You died in the accident. I saw the body. I buried you." "I know," he said, and for a moment, there was only silence except for his labored breathing. "I know. But I think I'm alive." I let out a shaky breath, my head spinning. What was this? A prank? Someone pretending to be him? Maybe someone who'd found the details of the accident and decided to play a cruel joke. But something in the way he said my name, something real in his voice, stopped me from hanging up. He wasn't joking. "Where are you?" I asked, my words barely coming out. "I'm not sure," he replied. "I'm in a place called Hawthorne Shelter. It's on East Park Street, but I don't really remember how I got here. I don't remember anything before now. I think I've been here a long time." His words hit me like a punch. East Park Street. I knew the place. It wasn't far, but still. How could this be possible? Simon was supposed to be dead. This couldn't be real. The thought of him alive after all these years filled me with confusion, disbelief, and, yes, hope. But there was something unsettling about it all. My brother? The man I buried? He was somewhere out there? What do you remember? I pressed, my mind racing. "Snow," he said, his voice distant. "The crash. It's all blurry. I remember being cold. Screams. Then nothing. Just waking up. Somewhere else." I took a deep breath, trying to process what he was saying. I wanted to believe it, but the logical part of me, the part that had seen his body, refused to let go. But he was alive. He had to be. "I'm coming to find you," I said, trying to steady my voice, though my hands were trembling. "Stay there. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming." The line was silent for a moment before he whispered, "Okay. I'll wait." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was going to find, but one thing was clear. The life I thought I knew, the life I had moved on with, was never going to be the same again. I didn't waste any time. The call had shattered something in me, something deep and buried. The car keys were in my hand before I even knew what I was doing. I didn't even bother to wake Sarah. She didn't need to know about this yet. How could I explain that the brother I buried 30 years ago might actually be alive? I couldn't. Not until I saw him with my own eyes. The drive felt endless. The roads were slick with early morning fog, and every mile that passed was filled with the same thoughts swirling in my mind. What was going on? Could Simon really be alive? Was I just imagining it? Maybe it was all some cruel joke. A hoax. But something about the way he spoke, the way he said my name, his voice, that was unmistakable. That was Simon. The hours passed in a haze, but I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut. What if I was wrong? What if this was someone else? What if the body I identified all those years ago wasn't Simon? What if? I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, trying to shake off the thought. I wasn't ready to confront it. But I had to. I had no choice. This wasn't just about Simon anymore. It was about everything I had lost, everything I thought was gone forever. The life I'd rebuilt after his death. Was it a lie? The shelter on East Park Street came into view as the sun began to rise, casting long shadows over the empty streets. The place looked grim. One of those run-down buildings that barely seemed to belong. The kind of place you passed by without a second thought. Not where you'd expect to find someone you thought you lost forever. I parked and sat there for a moment, staring at the building. What was I about to walk into? I had no idea. I couldn't even begin to prepare myself for what I might find inside. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. The air was chilly, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered right now except getting answers. The front door of the shelter creaked as I pushed it open. A woman behind a desk looked up when I entered. She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised to see someone who looked so out of place in this part of town. "I'm looking for someone," I said, my voice rough. "His name's Simon. He said he's been staying here. I spoke with him earlier this morning." The woman studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Simon. Yeah, he's been around for a while. Pretty quiet guy. Came in last night, said something about an emergency. Been asking to use the phone. Can you tell me where he is?" I asked, my patience starting to wear thin. She pointed down a narrow hallway. "Common room straight ahead. You'll find him there." I didn't say another word. I just walked down the hall, each step echoing in the silence. My heart pounded harder with every step, as if it knew what was coming. The door to the common room was ajar, and I hesitated for just a second before pushing it open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with mismatched chairs and people slumped in them, looking like they hadn't seen a decent meal in weeks. The smell of stale air and old furniture filled the space. My eyes scanned the room until they landed on him. He was sitting alone, hunched over at a small table near the window. His back was turned to me, but I knew it was him. I could feel it. The same energy. The same presence. Even after all these years, he was still my brother. I took a deep breath and stepped closer. My legs felt like lead, and for a moment I almost turned back. But no. I had to see it for myself. "Simon," I said softly, my voice catching in my throat. He turned around slowly, and when our eyes met, everything around me seemed to disappear. This wasn't the brother I remembered. The face before me was older, worn down by years of hardship. His hair was long and graying, his skin weathered like leather. But his eyes were the same. The same dark, soulful eyes I had seen in the mirror every day of my life. "Robert?" His voice cracked as he said my name, and I felt the floodgates of emotion begin to open. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could do was stare at him. The man in front of me was still my brother, somehow. I didn't know what to say. How do you begin to talk to the person you thought was gone forever? But I had to. I had to ask the question that was eating away at me. Where have you been all this time?" I finally managed to say. "I don't know," he replied, his voice hollow. "I don't remember much. Just bits and pieces." The drive felt endless. The roads were slick with fog, and my thoughts were racing, none of them making any sense. Was this real? Could Simon really be alive? My mind kept replaying the same questions. What if I was wrong? What if I had been deceived? The night felt like it dragged on forever, but eventually the shelter on East Park Street came into view. It was an old, dilapidated building. Nothing like what I expected. It looked like a place for people with nowhere else to go, cracked windows, a flickering light in the hallway. I parked the car and just sat there for a moment, staring at the building. It didn't make sense. This couldn't be happening. Simon couldn't be here. My brother, the one I buried, wasn't supposed to be anywhere but gone. But my gut told me otherwise. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my wallet and stepped out of the car. The air was cold and biting, but it didn't matter. I needed to know. I couldn't keep wondering. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, the smell of stale air and old coffee hit me immediately. The woman at the desk barely glanced up when I approached. She looked tired, worn down by too many people passing through. But I had no time for pleasantries. "I'm looking for someone," I said, my voice tight. "His name's Simon. He called me earlier today. Said he's been here." The woman gave me a long look, then nodded. "Yeah, Simon. He's been here for a while. Came in last night, asked to use the phone. Said something about an emergency. Can you tell me where he is?" I asked, my patience thinning. She motioned down the hallway. "Common room. He was in there a few minutes ago. Just go straight down." I didn't say another word. I walked down the hall, my footsteps echoing in the silence. My heart was pounding now. The questions kept spinning in my head. What if it wasn't him? What if this was all some sick joke? What if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life? I reached the door to the common room and paused for a second. There was no turning back now. The room was dimly lit. A few people sat around, slouched in mismatched chairs, staring blankly at the TV. Some were asleep. Some were lost in their thoughts. But then I saw him. Simon. He was sitting alone at a small table near the window, his back to me. I recognized him immediately, but he didn't look like the brother I remembered. His hair was longer, streaked with gray, and he looked worn, almost unrecognizable. His face was thinner, covered with a scruffy beard. But his eyes, those eyes, I knew them instantly. "Simon," I said quietly, stepping closer. He turned slowly. When our eyes met, something inside me broke. It was him. But it wasn't the same man I remembered. The years, the hardship had changed him. "Robert," he said, his voice cracking. It was soft, almost fragile, like he wasn't sure I would believe it. "I wasn't sure you would come." I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at him. This wasn't the brother I buried, but it was him. The same eyes. The same soul. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. "What happened to you?" I asked, though the question felt inadequate. "I don't know," Simon replied, shaking his head. "I remember the crash. I remember being cold. Screaming. But after that, nothing. I woke up somewhere else, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know anything." I sat across from Simon, still trying to make sense of everything. He was alive, somehow. But he wasn't the same man I remembered. He had changed, not just physically but in ways I couldn't yet grasp. His eyes were the same, yes. But there was a deep, unsettling emptiness behind them. A void where years of memories should have been. I leaned forward. "What else do you remember, Simon? Anything more about what happened? Anything before you woke up in the shelter?" He shook his head slowly, his gaze drifting to the worn-out table between us. "Not much. Just flashes. Little things like I'm picking up pieces of a puzzle. I remember snow. I remember the cold, and people screaming. And then, nothing. Just darkness." There was something in his voice, a kind of sadness, like he had long accepted that the answers weren't coming. I could see it on his face. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not now. "Is there anything else? Anything else that feels familiar?" I pressed, hoping something would click. Something to bring him back to who he used to be. His eyes darkened, and he seemed to shrink into himself. There was a house. A house with a blue door. I don't know why, but I keep seeing it. And I remember pancakes. Someone used to make pancakes for me. Blueberry pancakes. Every Sunday morning. At the mention of pancakes, something stirred inside me. It was like a floodgate opening, releasing a torrent of memories. I could see it now. The house we grew up in. The old kitchen, warm with the smell of pancakes, the sunlight streaming through the window on Sunday mornings. Mom used to make them every week without fail. I felt a lump in my throat. "Mom?" I whispered. "You remember Mom?" Simon nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and confusion. "I think so. I remember her smile, the way she looked when she was happy. But everything after that, it's just gone." I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. The weight of it all, the fact that my brother had been alone all this time, living without even knowing who he was, it was too much to bear. And yet here he was, alive. But not the same. Not completely. A silence stretched between us as I processed it all. He had been lost, physically and mentally. All this time he had lived in the shadows, and I had no idea. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my temples. "Simon, I know this is hard, but we need to figure out what happened. We need to find out who did this to you. Why you were left like this." He looked at me, his gaze still distant. "I don't know if I can remember all of it. But I need to know too. I don't know what happened, or how I ended up here, but I need to know why." I took a deep breath, my heart aching for him. I had thought I had lost him forever. And now that he was here, alive, I wasn't sure how to bring him back from the life he'd been forced into. But I had to try. "We'll figure it out. Together. We'll get the answers." Simon didn't speak, but he nodded slowly. It was a small gesture, but it was enough for me to believe that, maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back. It had been days since Simon and I had started looking for answers. What had happened to him? Why had he been abandoned all those years ago? The questions gnawed at us, but the more we dug, the more the answers seemed to slip further away. We started with the few memories Simon could recall. The snow, the crash, the people screaming. Every time he tried to go further back, he seemed to hit a wall. It was as if his past had been erased, buried beneath layers of trauma and confusion. But one thing stuck with me: the house. The house with the blue door. Simon had mentioned it again, more vividly this time. He described the smell of pancakes and the warmth of a home filled with love, a place he could never quite reach. "We have to find that house," I said, looking at Simon as he sat across from me. The weight of the years had aged him in ways I couldn't have imagined. The years of living on the streets, of surviving with no identity, had worn him down. But his eyes, those eyes were still the same. Simon nodded slowly, though there was doubt in his gaze. "I don't know what it means. But I feel like it's important. Like if we find it, we'll find the answers." It wasn't much to go on, but it was all we had. I knew that house had to be in the past we shared. It was the only lead we had to understanding why Simon had vanished, and why it had taken so long for us to reconnect. We spent the next few days combing through old records, reaching out to anyone who might know something. Friends of the family, neighbors, even distant relatives. Everyone remembered the house, the one on Maple Street with the blue door. It was where we spent our childhood, a place filled with happy memories. But no one had seen Simon since the day he disappeared. No one had any answers. The more we searched, the more frustrated I became. It felt like we were getting closer, but every step forward led to more dead ends. "I don't know if this is helping," Simon said one night as we sat in the cramped hotel room. He looked tired, his mind clearly overwhelmed. "Maybe we should just forget it? Maybe I'm not supposed to remember." I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to tell him that we had to keep going, that we were close to finding the truth. But deep down I was starting to wonder if we were chasing ghosts. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying everything that had happened. Why had he been taken? Why hadn't we known sooner? I kept asking myself what I had missed all those years ago. Then it hit me. The newspaper clipping. The one Simon had found, the one that mentioned his name. There was something about that date that made me uneasy. Something didn't add up. The next morning I went back to the library. The librarian who had helped us before was there, and she was happy to assist again. I asked her to pull up every record, every article, anything related to the crash, the people involved, and the years after. Hours passed as we sifted through stacks of old newspapers, microfilm, and archives. And then I found it. There, buried in a small article from the local paper, was a mention of the accident that had taken Simon from me all those years ago. But it wasn't just about the crash, it was about the aftermath. The survivors. The missing person. And there, in black and white, was the name of the person who had been driving the truck that night. Someone I knew. Someone who had been close to our family. "Rob," Simon whispered from behind me. I hadn't even realized he was standing there. His voice sounded hollow, like he'd just discovered something terrible. "Who is that?" I turned to look at him, my stomach sinking. I had no words. I knew exactly who it was. The man responsible for the accident, the one who had caused Simon's life to spiral into nothingness, was someone I trusted. Someone I never would have suspected. And that was when I knew we had to move quickly. The answers we were looking for were within reach, but so was danger. "We're going after him," I said, standing up and grabbing my coat. "We can't waste any more time. We need to confront him." We were no longer just searching for answers. We had crossed a line. What we had discovered, the name of the person involved in Simon's disappearance, wasn't just a piece of the puzzle. It was a weapon. And it was time to use it. The name was unmistakable: Robert Carver. A man I had known for years. He had been a close friend of the family, always around for barbecues, holidays, even helping with the yard work when Dad was still alive. I never suspected him of anything. I had always thought of him as a good man, a friend. But the newspaper article I had found, it changed everything. The accident that had taken Simon's life was no accident at all. Carver had been behind the wheel of the truck that crashed into Simon that night, sending him into the darkness that had lasted for so long. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been blind. Simon's past, his amnesia, the lost years, wasn't just about a simple accident. It was about betrayal. And it wasn't just about what happened that night. Carver had lied to us. He had covered it up. And somewhere along the way he had made sure Simon was lost. Left to fend for himself with no memory of who he was, no help from anyone. "We're going after him," I said to Simon as we sat in the cramped hotel room, the weight of the decision pressing on me like a stone in my chest. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew that once we made this choice, there was no turning back. "Are you sure?" Simon asked, his voice quiet. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, for what's coming." "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steady, though I felt anything but calm. "We've come this far. We can't stop now. You deserve answers, Simon. And he needs to answer for what he did to you." Simon looked at me for a long moment before nodding. "All right. Let's do it." The decision had been made. The plan was simple though risky. Carver lived on the outskirts of town, in a large house that looked out of place compared to the rest of the neighborhood. His house was always too big, too perfect, too clean. Everything about it screamed power. And that power had to come from somewhere. We knew where he lived, but we needed more. We needed proof. We needed to confront him with everything we had. And we needed to catch him off guard. So we started by watching. For the next few days, Simon and I camped out, taking turns to observe Carver's movements. He had a routine: work at a nearby construction site, dinner at the local diner, and then home by 9 p.m. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, But every time I saw him leave his house, the anger inside me grew stronger. It was hard to believe that the man I had once trusted could have been so involved in Simon's destruction. But it was all falling into place now. I wasn't just looking for answers anymore. I was looking for revenge. Finally, one evening, Carver didn't leave his house. Simon and I had been watching from across the street for hours. I felt a mix of frustration and anticipation building inside me. The house was dark, the blinds drawn. It was almost as if he was waiting for us. "We have to do this now," I said to Simon, my heart racing. "We can't wait any longer." Simon's face was pale, but there was something different in his eyes now. It wasn't fear. It was resolve. He was no longer just the brother I thought I had lost. He was someone else now, someone who was ready to take control of his own fate. We crossed the street slowly, keeping to the shadows. I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me, but I couldn't stop. This was our only shot. As we reached the front door, I hesitated for a moment. This was it. There would be no going back after this. I knocked twice hard. We waited, our breaths coming faster with every second. After a long moment, the door opened slightly. Carver's face appeared, confused at first and then recognition. His eyes widened and I could see a flicker of fear. "What the hell is this?" he spat, stepping back to shut the door. I shoved the door open, surprising him. Simon stood behind me, silent but determined. "You're going to answer for what you did," I said, my voice low but sharp. "What you did to my brother." Carver's face went pale. He knew. He knew exactly what we were here for. The door slammed shut behind us as Carver stumbled backward, his eyes wide with panic. For a moment he just stood there, not knowing what to say, his mouth moving but no words coming out. I could see the fear creeping into his face. Simon was quiet behind me, his presence like a weight in the room. He wasn't just standing there for show, he was here for a reason. This wasn't just my revenge. It was his too. The fact that Carver was trembling in front of us was the first real sign that maybe, just maybe, we had the upper hand. Carver finally found his voice. "You two have no idea what you're doing," he sneered, trying to regain some semblance of control. "You think you can just show up here and make demands? You don't know anything about what happened. About why it happened." I stepped forward, ignoring his words. "We know enough, Carver. You're the reason Simon disappeared. You're the reason I buried him. You took him from us. And now we're taking back what you stole." Simon didn't move, but his eyes locked onto Carver's. He was standing still, absorbing every word. For years he had lived without his identity, without knowing the truth. But now here was the man who had caused it all. His anger simmered just beneath the surface and I could feel it. This was as much Simon's fight as it was mine. Carver smirked, though there was a nervous edge to it. "You think you've figured it out, don't you? But you don't know the whole story. You have no idea what you're dealing with." I felt a rush of anger and frustration. I wanted him to admit it. I wanted him to say the words. To tell us everything. "Tell us what happened, Carver," I demanded, my voice cold, barely containing my fury. "Tell us how you got away with it." Carver's face shifted, his smugness faltering. He took a step back, almost as if weighing his options, his mind clearly racing. "You think I was the one who—" He stopped himself, his expression darkening. "You don't know who's really behind this. You never did." The room went still and for the first time, a deep chill filled the air. Simon and I exchanged a glance. This wasn't just about the past. This was about something bigger. "I've been protecting you," Carver continued, his voice now low, almost pleading. "You have no idea what's going on. The people I work with, they didn't want you to know the truth. If you want to survive, you need to stop looking for answers." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The realization hit me like a slap to the face. Carver wasn't just a bystander in Simon's disappearance. He had been part of it. But more than that, he had been lying to us for years. Protecting someone, something from the truth. And that truth? It was far darker than I could have imagined. Simon stepped forward now, his voice steady but full of rage. "Who, Carver? Who were you protecting? Who else was involved?" Carver's eyes darted around the room, his body tense. "You won't survive this. You've already crossed the line. They're watching you. And when they find out you're here, it's over." The warning barely registered in my mind. It wasn't fear I felt, it was clarity. Carver wasn't just an ordinary man. He had ties, connections that reached deeper than we could understand. He wasn't just hiding something. He was involved in something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. "What do you mean?" Simon pressed. "Who are they?" Carver hesitated, but the weight of the truth was beginning to sink in. "The people who made sure you were gone. The ones who erased your existence. They don't want you to remember. They don't want anyone to know the truth. And if you keep digging, they'll come for you. For both of you. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. They erased Simon's existence? And who were these people who could make someone disappear? Who had that kind of power? It was then that I realized Carver wasn't the key. He was just a piece of the puzzle. A pawn. The real players were still out there, lurking in the shadows. I turned to Simon. The realization hit us both at the same time. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. We weren't just fighting for answers. We were fighting for our lives. "You're not getting away with this," I said, my voice low, the fury bubbling up again. "You'll pay for what you did. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." Carver sneered, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. He knew the truth. He knew what was coming next. And it terrified him. As I turned to leave, Simon by my side, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. We had crossed a point of no return. But now we knew there was something much larger at play. And we were going to tear it all down, no matter the cost. We couldn't just walk away from Carver, not now. The truth was out there, buried under years of lies and manipulation. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how deep this went. This wasn't just about Simon's disappearance, it was about something far bigger. Someone had orchestrated it all, someone with far more power than we'd ever imagined. But Carver was only one piece of the puzzle. I had known him for years, trusted him, and yet he was part of something much darker. It didn't make sense. How could someone we thought we knew so well be so involved in something so sinister? That night, after confronting Carver, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of who else was involved. Simon and I needed to find out more, but every move we made felt like we were walking on a razor's edge. The people Carver spoke of, the ones who erased Simon's existence, weren't some shadowy figures from the past. They were still here, still pulling the strings. We had to act quickly. The next morning we sat in a small cafe, surrounded by the normalcy of other people's lives. It felt so out of place. Simon's eyes were distant as he stared out the window, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. "We need to find out who's really behind this," I said, my voice steady but low. "We need to figure out who erased you, Simon. Who decided your life didn't matter." Simon turned to me, his expression blank, but his eyes held a depth of sadness I hadn't seen before. "I'm not sure I can handle any more. I've been living in the dark for so long. What if we find something we can't undo?" His words hit me hard, but I couldn't let myself stop. He couldn't stop. We had to go all the way. There was no other choice. "Trust me," I said. "We're going to do this together. And we're going to get the answers we deserve." I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. But Simon nodded, a small flicker of determination in his eyes. Our next step was clear. We needed to find the people Carver was protecting, the ones who were still in control. And if we wanted to get answers, we had to be prepared to do whatever it took to uncover the truth. I contacted a few old friends who might have information. People who owed me favors, or at least people who could point us in the right direction. One name kept coming up: Andrew Calloway. A man who had been in the same circles as Carver, someone who had connections to the kind of people we were now facing. It didn't take long to track him down. He was living in a secure, gated apartment building on the edge of the city. A place for people who wanted to keep their distance from the world. Simon and I arrived late that evening, the city lights casting long shadows on the streets. We parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the way, keeping to the darkened alleys. The building was a fortress. Tall, sleek, and completely intimidating. "I don't think we're going to get in unnoticed," Simon whispered, his voice tight with nervousness. "I don't care about unnoticed," I muttered back. "We need answers." We approached the building's entrance and I rang the intercom. A woman's voice crackled through the speaker. "Who's there?" she asked, her tone flat. "We're here to see Andrew Calloway," I said, trying to sound confident. "Tell him it's Robert, from years ago." There was a long pause before she responded. "One moment." The door buzzed and we stepped inside, making our way to the elevator. The building was silent, the kind of silence that made every step feel like an intrusion. When we reached the top floor, I knocked on Andrew's door. The sound of footsteps approached from the other side, and the door creaked open. Andrew stood there, taller than I remembered, his hair graying at the temples. He hadn't changed much, still sharp, still confident. "Robert," he said, his eyes scanning me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "It's been a long time." "It has," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk. It's about Simon." Andrew's expression faltered. He knew exactly who Simon was. He had been involved in everything. The years of silence, the years of hiding the truth, he had been part of it all. What do you want? Andrew asked, his voice low, wary. He knew this wasn't just a casual visit. Answers, I said, stepping into the apartment. We want to know who's behind all of this. Who's been hiding the truth from us? Andrew looked from me to Simon, his face unreadable. He knew what we were asking for. And I could tell he wasn't going to give it up easily. But I wasn't leaving without answers. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you've gone too far, Andrew said, his voice thick with warning. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Tell us everything, I demanded. Now. He hesitated, then sighed as if resigned to something. All right, he said. But you won't like the truth. Andrew didn't need much time to decide. His gaze shifted between Simon and me, and it was clear he knew the gravity of what was happening. This wasn't some casual conversation anymore. It wasn't just about the past, it was about survival. He motioned for us to sit, but his face tightened, like he wasn't sure if telling us the truth was a good idea. But he'd already started, and there was no turning back now. I wasn't the one who erased Simon, Andrew said, his voice steady but full of resignation. But I know who did. The words hit me harder than I expected. Simon, who had been sitting in silence, looked up at Andrew with a mix of disbelief and hope. This was it. This was the moment we'd been waiting for. Who? I asked, leaning forward. Tell me who's behind this. Andrew hesitated for a moment, almost like he was debating whether or not to run. But the truth was out now. He had no choice. You think Carver's the big player? He's a pawn, Robert. A small piece of a much bigger game. The ones behind this aren't just criminals. They've got their hands in everything. Politics, business, even law enforcement. They control everything. I didn't know whether to believe him. But something in the weight of his words felt true. And that's when I realized we weren't just dealing with some local thugs. We had entered a world that was far more dangerous than anything I'd ever imagined. I narrowed my eyes. Who are they? Give me a name. Andrew let out a long breath, as if preparing himself to give us a name that would change everything. You're better off not knowing. But you're already too deep. The people I'm talking about, they'll come after you. After both of you. What do you mean? Simon asked, his voice tinged with both fear and anger. Andrew shot him a look. They're not just gonna walk away. They'll find you. They'll erase everything about you. Everything. I grabbed his arm, urgency flooding through me. Tell us everything you know. You don't get to just drop a bomb like that and walk away. We need names. We need to know who's responsible. He took a step back, clearly wrestling with his conscience. I've been protecting you by keeping my mouth shut. But you've pushed me too far. If you really want to know, if you're ready to risk everything, I'll give you the name. But once you take that step, there's no going back. They'll be hunting you for the rest of your life. Andrew scribbled something on a napkin, and without another word, he slid it across the table. I took it, my eyes scanning the name written in bold letters. It wasn't familiar. But it was someone with enough power to make us pay for seeking the truth. This is your only shot, Andrew said, his voice low. Go after this person and you'll get the answers. But be careful. There are eyes everywhere. You'll be watched. I stared at the napkin in my hand, my mind racing. This wasn't just about Simon's past anymore. This was about something much bigger. We were no longer hunting shadows. We were chasing ghosts with too many people ready to kill to keep their secrets. What now? Simon asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I could hear the doubt in his voice, the uncertainty. But I wasn't going to let it stop me. Not now. We go after them, I said, my voice firm. We find out who's behind this and we make them pay. No matter the cost. Simon nodded, though his face was pale, his expression serious. We both knew this was a dangerous game, but neither of us was willing to turn back. As we left the apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just walked into a storm. But it was too late to stop now. We had come this far and nothing was going to make us quit. We were hunting the people who had taken Simon's life from him, and now they had to answer for it. The man stepped closer, his eyes cold as ice. There was no hesitation in his movements, just a quiet, calculating assurance that we were out of our depth. He knew who we were. He knew what we were looking for. And now he wasn't going to let us walk away. Do you really think you can just walk into this world and start digging around, Robert? He asked, his voice smooth and unnerving. You've uncovered something you weren't supposed to. And now you'll pay the price. I stood my ground despite the fear that gripped me. I'd come this far. I wasn't going to back down now. I'm not afraid of you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We're not leaving until we get the truth. No matter what it costs. The man chuckled, the sound almost mocking. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The people behind this aren't just a couple of criminals in some back alley. They're untouchable. You think you've been playing the game? You're not even on the board. My heart raced. Every word he said sent a ripple of fear through me. But I wasn't about to let it control me. What do you want from us? Simon finally spoke up, his voice steady but full of resolve. What happens now? The man's smile faded. He stepped aside, revealing a door behind him. What happens now is that you leave. You walk out of here, forget everything and go back to your lives. Or you stay and you both become part of the system you've been trying to tear down. It's your choice. I felt Simon's hand on my shoulder. He was ready. We had already made our decision. We were in too deep to back out now. No, I said, shaking my head. We're not running. We're going to end this. The man's eyes narrowed. For the first time, I saw something break in his composed facade. He wasn't just a guard anymore. He was part of the force that had kept Simon in the shadows for so long. And now we were threatening to take it all down. I moved first, stepping toward him, determined. We don't care who you work for. You're not going to stop us. Simon followed me, his face set in a grim expression. We were done being afraid. The man lunged at me, his hand reaching for a weapon at his side, but I was quicker. I tackled him to the ground, disarming him before he had a chance to react. The struggle was brief. His shock, the surprise of the unexpected, was all we needed. We're not just looking for revenge, Simon said, panting as he stood over the man. We're looking for justice. The man lay on the ground, breathing heavily, his hands raised in surrender. He knew it was over. He knew that the game had changed. We'll take you down, I said, looking into his eyes, my voice cold. And we'll take down everyone who's been involved in this. We're not leaving until we have the truth. All of it. As we walked out of the mansion, the weight of everything hit me. We had uncovered the truth. But it came with a price. We weren't safe. We had made enemies, powerful enemies. But I didn't care anymore. We had come too far. We had Simon back. And that was all that mattered.